Steelers fans, full attention, because the atmosphere in Pittsburgh has shifted dramatically in the last few hours. What was once just anticipation has turned into a harsh reality check that could define the direction of this season. The final report is out, and with it came that unmistakable feeling that Sunday won't be just another game, but a test of toughness, depth, and identity. From here on out, every piece of this roster is going to be challenged. It's the kind of moment where the pressure hits, the city holds its breath, and history chooses which way it's going to lean. So come in strong, smash that like button, support the video, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Now, no more delays, let's get into it. Alex Highsmith being officially ruled out with that pec injury is the kind of loss that normally sends a fan base into panic mode, but this year the tone is different because Nick Herbig keeps proving he is not just a backup, he's a weapon. Every time he's been thrust into a starting role, the pass rush has stayed aggressive, disruptive, and honestly violent in a way that keeps offensive coordinators guessing. With Jack Sawyer sliding into that third rotational spot, you can already feel the staff leaning into their confidence in those young edge guys. Sawyer has quietly stacked good tape, and now he gets an expanded role in a game where disrupting the quarterback is going to dictate everything. Then there's Cole Holcomb, missing his third straight game with that illness. Malik Harrison has stepped into that third inside linebacker role and held the line well enough, but it still changes the way this defense rotates and attacks the middle of the field. When you combine that with Darius Slay being ruled out due to the concussion, suddenly the dominoes start falling in the secondary, and how Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin rearrange those pieces might be the most fascinating part of this entire matchup. Because James Pierre is now set to start again, and the man has been on an absolute tear the last 2 weeks. 6 pass breakups in 2 games is not normal production. It's the kind of short burst surge that makes you wonder whether a player is finally finding his stride. And with T. Higgins on the other side this week, Pierre's length and physicality suddenly become more than traits. They become the Steelers' best shot at controlling one of Cincinnati's biggest threats. The Asante Samuel Jr. situation adds even more intrigue. He hasn't been elevated yet, but with Slay out, the logic is right there in front of us. You're one injury away from forcing Jalen Ramsey to abandon safety responsibilities, and 2 injuries away from a crisis. Elevating Asante as an emergency option feels like the responsible move. Whether they actually do it becomes its own storyline heading into tomorrow. And speaking of Ramsey, his role now becomes one of the biggest chess pieces on this defense. Mike Tomlin called him a stabilizing force at safety, and he's earned that praise. But with Jabril Peppers officially back from the quad injury, the coaching staff is staring at a choice. Keep Ramsey and Kyle Duggar as the safety duo, or slide Ramsey down to nickel where he still plays at a high level and plug Peppers in at safety, something that resembles the system Peppers and Duggar ran together in New England. Brandon Echols' struggles these past 2 weeks can't be ignored, and if the staff truly wants to fortify the softest spot in the secondary, moving Ramsey to nickel might be the cleanest fix they have. It's the kind of tweak that doesn't just patch a hole, it could legitimately elevate the entire pass defense. And on the offensive side, the ripple effects continue with Isaac Sumolo likely out after missing Friday's practice. Spencer Anderson at left guard and Andrew Pete for jumbo personnel changes the entire texture of the run game. Every time Sumolo has been out, the identity of this offense has wobbled. The blocking isn't as firm, the lanes aren't as clean, and the rhythm feels slightly off. But with Broderick Jones cleared from the groin injury and set to start, at least Pittsburgh enters this game with one of its most important anchors intact. Jabril Peppers returning also puts pressure on the staff to decide how aggressively they want to experiment with alignments. When this defense finds the right combination, they can be suffocating. But when the pieces aren't aligned correctly, they've shown cracks, especially in the slot. And then we get to Cincinnati's side of things, where the Bengals walk in without Joe Burrow, without Trey Hendrickson, without rookie edge rusher Shamar Stewart, without backup running back Sam Perrine, and maybe without Lucas Patrick on the offensive line. There's a difference between being banged up and being structurally compromised, and this Bengals roster is starting to look like the latter. That creates opportunity, but also pressure, because dropping a game to a team this depleted would be brutal for Pittsburgh's momentum. On top of all that, the wide receiver conversation is heating up again. Marquez Valdes-Scantling might not be elevated despite plenty of fan anticipation, because the staff seems committed to rolling with Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, and their tight ends. And with Pat Freiermuth reminding everyone earlier this season, especially in the last Bengals matchup, that he can produce 110-plus yards and multiple touchdowns when featured, the question becomes whether the staff is finally ready to shift more responsibility back toward him and away from Jonnu Smith, whose receiving production has been far below expectations. So with all these moving pieces, questions, and last-minute decisions still hanging in the air, the real story heading into Sunday is simple. Can this team take advantage of the opportunities created by injuries on both sides, or will these changes expose weaknesses that Cincinnati can exploit? Right now the picture becomes even clearer when you zoom in on how these adjustments will actually play out on the field, because none of these changes exist in a vacuum. Every missing starter, every returning piece, every possible practice squad elevation creates a chain reaction that shapes how the Steelers will attack, defend, and adapt once the ball is kicked off. Take the pass rush, for example. With Alex Highsmith out, you're not just swapping in Nick Herbig and hoping for the best, you're fundamentally changing the way offensive lines have to prepare. Herbig's explosiveness off the snap isn't the same as Highsmith's technical, disciplined approach. Herbig's style is more chaotic, more unpredictable, and that forces Cincinnati's offensive tackles, already weakened by injuries, to think and react differently. And when you combine that with TJ Watt demanding double teams on almost every snap, suddenly Jack Sawyer's reps become incredibly important. He's not coming in just to give someone a breather. He's stepping into a game where Cincinnati's protection is thin. Their quarterback is a backup, and every mistake could swing the entire afternoon. And that brings us to the secondary, where things get even more complicated. James Pierre stepping into the starting lineup changes the way this defense can structure its matchups. His length allows the Steelers to play differently on the boundary, more press, more physicality, more disruption at the catch point. That becomes meaningful when you're facing a wideout like T. Higgins, who wins with size, leverage, and body control. Pierre is one of the few corners on the roster who can actually match that profile physically. But if Pierre is the steadying piece, then the big swing factor is Jalen Ramsey. If the staff decides to keep him deep with Kyle Duggar, they're banking on stabilizing the back end and living with Brandon Echols in the slot, despite 2 straight weeks of getting exposed, especially by polished route runners. If they move Ramsey to nickel and plug Jabril Peppers in at safety, they're betting on versatility, aggressiveness, and run support from a familiar pairing. And honestly, that alignment might give them the best chance to suffocate Cincinnati's short and intermediate game, especially with Burrow out and the Bengals leaning heavily on timing-based throws. The ripple effects don't stop there. On offense, Isaac Seumalo being out turns every run call into a question mark. Spencer Anderson can hold his own, but he's not Seumalo, not in power, not in leverage, not in timing. And the moment you remove Seumalo, you force this offense to get creative. You need Broderick Jones to be at his absolute best. You need the tight ends to block cleaner. You need fewer mistakes, fewer missed assignments, and more rhythm from Arthur Smith's scheme. That's why the conversation around Pat Freiermuth matters. He isn't just a pass catcher, he's a player who can help stabilize the offense when things get muddy. And if Pittsburgh wants to exploit Cincinnati's depleted defensive front, missing Hendrickson, missing Stewart, stretched thin on the edge, it starts with giving Freiermuth the volume and opportunity he's earned. The Bengals' injuries amplify those opportunities even more. With their pass rush weakened and their offensive line banged up, the Steelers should be able to dictate pace, dictate matchups, dictate tone. But as this team has shown all year, nothing is guaranteed simply because the opponent is hurting. Pittsburgh has had chances to capitalize before and failed to do it. That's what makes this game so important, not because of playoff math, but because it's a test of identity. Can this team impose its will when the door is wide open? Or will inconsistency show up again? Across the board, this matchup looks like one where the Steelers can control every phase if they execute. But execution has been the question all season, and now we're walking into a game where depth players, role players, and returning veterans have to act like anchors. Herbig has to play like a true starting outside linebacker. Pierre has to keep playing at an elite level. Ramsey has to be deployed in the spot where he helps the entire defense the most. Anderson has to avoid becoming a weak point. Freiermuth has to reclaim the volume and impact that makes him this team's most reliable receiving option behind DK Metcalf. And the coaching staff must nail the personnel decisions that will shape the rhythm of the whole game. With all of that on the table, the real question now is simple. With so many injuries reshaping both sidelines, which team actually handles the adjustments better once the game starts? And when you step back and look at where this game is heading, you realize the outcome won't hinge on star power. It'll hinge on how well the Steelers maximize the players stepping into bigger roles. That's why the next layer of this story becomes so important. The coaching decisions that will come in real time. Because this isn't just about who starts, it's about how quickly Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, and Arthur Smith react if something isn't working. For example, if Brandon Echols starts the game in the slot and immediately struggles, how fast will the staff pivot to moving Jalen Ramsey down and inserting Jabril Peppers at safety? That adjustment could change the entire complexion of the passing defense, but it also requires trust that Peppers is fully healthy, trust that Ramsey can transition mid-game without miscommunication, trust that the entire secondary can absorb the shift without losing structure. And those are the kinds of decisions that can flip momentum instantly. On the defensive front, the same pressure exists. Nick Herbig's motor is unmatched, but if Cincinnati starts attacking his edge with misdirection or using their running backs to chip and slow him down, how quickly will the Steelers rotate Jack Sawyer to keep the tempo high? Without Highsmith, there's a fine line between relying on Herbig's burst and burning him out too quickly. It's a balance they'll have to manage snap by snap. Then there's the question of whether the Steelers will bring more pressure than usual. With the Bengals missing Trey Hendrickson, missing their rookie edge rusher, and likely missing a starting lineman, the Steelers' goal should be to build an early lead and force Cincinnati into a one-dimensional game. The quickest path to that is pressure, consistent, uncomfortable, relentless pressure that makes a backup quarterback fold before the second quarter ends. But the Steelers have been conservative at times when facing backup QBs, choosing coverage-heavy looks instead of attacking. With this personnel, with this matchup, with this opportunity, it would be a mistake not to unleash the pass rush early and often. And offensively, the Steelers face their own identity test. Without Isaac Sumolo, the run game could easily stall if the coaching staff pretends nothing has changed. They can't just run inside zone into the teeth of the defense and hope for the best. They need to lean into motion, misdirection, quicker developing runs, and a heavier dose of concepts that play to Spencer Anderson's athletic strengths rather than trying to replace Sumolo's power. This offensive line isn't built to overcome stubborn play calling. It needs schematic support, which brings the conversation back to the pass game. Pat Freiermuth is the key that unlocks everything. He's the one player on this offense who can consistently win the middle of the field, bail out the quarterback, and punish mismatches. When he's featured, the offense moves. When he's ignored, it sputters. And against a Bengals team missing pieces and struggling to generate pressure, there's no excuse not to scheme early touches for him. The same goes for putting Calvin Austin III and Roman Wilson in defined roles that actually play to their strengths instead of forcing them into responsibilities they aren't ready for. These young receivers need structure, not chaos. Ultimately, the reason this matchup feels so massive is because everything is aligning in a way that gives the Steelers a clean shot to control the pace, control the trenches, and control the scoreboard. But this team hasn't earned blind trust yet. They've shown flashes of dominance followed by stretches of inconsistency. And this game will tell us something, maybe not everything, but something meaningful, about whether they're maturing into a team that rises to the moment instead of shrinking when things get chaotic. So now it comes down to execution, discipline, and taking advantage of every weakness on the other sideline. With all the injuries, adjustments, and shifting roles, this game won't be won by simply showing up. It'll be won by the team that handles adversity smarter, faster, and with more intent. Steelers fans, with the lineup changes, injury impacts, and strategic decisions ahead, do you believe Pittsburgh is ready to seize this opportunity and impose their identity on the Bengals from the opening snap? And this is where the matchup truly becomes about mentality. Because when a team like Cincinnati walks into your stadium without Joe Burrow, without Trey Hendrickson, without key depth on both sides of the ball, the pressure shifts onto you. You're expected to dictate, expected to dominate the moments that matter, expected to walk off that field having proven you were the more prepared, more physical, more disciplined team. And the Steelers haven't always handled that role well. That's why this game carries weight far beyond the standings. What we're really watching is whether this roster understands how narrow the margins are at this point in the season. Every rep matters. Every substitution matters. Every matchup adjustment matters. For example, if Jalen Ramsey starts the game deep and the Bengals begin attacking the slot again, the staff can't afford to wait until the second half to correct it. This week, adjustments must be immediate. If Brandon Echols continues to struggle and Ramsey is the answer inside, it has to happen the moment the defense shows signs of stress. Because Cincinnati, even with a backup quarterback, still has enough talent at wide receiver to punish hesitation. The same urgency applies to the pass rush. Without Highsmith, every snap from Nick Herbig and Jack Sawyer carries more responsibility. Those two can't simply fill in, they have to generate real disruption. They have to tilt the pocket, force hurried throws, and steal downs. And what, as always, sets the standard. But dominating this game can't fall solely on him. Herbig's ability to produce pressure with pure burst, Sawyer's ability to hold the edge with power, those elements must sync from the opening drive. If they do, Cincinnati's offense shrinks dramatically. And then there's the offensive identity test. Without Sumalo, everything Arthur Smith calls needs to account for the shift in chemistry. You can't pretend the left side is unchanged. You can't lean on heavy personnel the same way unless the blocking holds. You can't let the offense slip into those dead stretches that killed momentum in earlier weeks. This game demands intentionality. It demands that the ball goes to Pat Freiermuth early and often. It demands that Calvin Austin III and Roman Wilson aren't left stranded on islands they can't win. It demands that the scheme adapts instead of waiting for players to compensate for structural weaknesses. And this isn't hypothetical, there's real evidence in that first Bengals matchup. Freiermuth shredded them. His ability to expose soft spots, manipulate leverage, and create separation down the seams forced Cincinnati to adjust all night. Replicating that kind of involvement isn't just smart, it's necessary. Depth across both sides of the ball is now the story of the week. The Steelers need clean games from Spencer Anderson, from Malik Harrison, from James Pierre, from Jack Sawyer. They need Jabril Peppers to step right back into full-speed decision-making if he's inserted at safety. They need Jalen Ramsey to be placed exactly where he helps the defense the most. They need receivers to play sharper, faster, and more decisive than they've shown in recent weeks. Because opportunity doesn't arrive as clearly very often. The Bengals are wounded. The Steelers are getting key pieces back. The matchups favor Pittsburgh in the trenches, in physicality, and in depth. But none of it matters if the execution isn't there. None of it matters if the coaching decisions aren't aggressive and reactive. None of it matters if this team plays down to the moment instead of rising above it. This game is a test, not of talent, not of flash, but of maturity. A chance to show whether this group is learning how to finish, how to capitalize, how to step into a matchup that is theirs to claim. Steelers fans, drop your thoughts below. Who do you believe will be the difference maker in this matchup? And before you head out, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and check out the next video popping up on your screen. Here we go. And when you really step back and absorb everything swirling around this matchup, you realize that every storyline traces back to the same core theme. This is a moment where the Steelers either solidify their identity or expose the cracks that have lingered all season. Because the reality is, every single decision this coaching staff makes on Sunday will reflect how much confidence they have in the roster as it stands right now, especially in the depth pieces who are no longer just depth. They're frontline contributors in a game Pittsburgh must control. Think about the defensive backfield one more time. The Steelers have a chance to transform a potential weakness into a strategic advantage. Jalen Ramsey played outstanding football at safety these past few weeks, but the staff knows exactly what he can do in the slot. They know that's where his instincts, physicality, and closing burst can erase quick-breaking routes that Cincinnati's passing game relies on without Burrow. And with Jabril Peppers fully available again, there's no excuse not to deploy the best combination possible. Duggar and Peppers together can bring the downhill physicality this defense has leaned on all year, and Ramsey sliding inside could fortify the single area that has been consistently attacked by opposing offenses. Those aren't just personnel decisions, they're statements about what the defensive identity is supposed to be. And then there's James Pierre, quietly becoming one of the most important players on this team. 6 pass breakups in 2 games is not normal. It's a disruption streak. It's a confidence burst. It's the type of performance that forces opponents to rethink their plan mid-game. And now he steps into a matchup where his length, timing, and physical style matter more than ever. This is the kind of moment that can cement a player's role moving forward, and Pierre has earned the chance to show whether this surge is a trend or a spark. On the front 7, the Steelers' depth at edge rusher has gone from a luxury to a necessity. Nick Herbig's energy has always been there, but now it has to sustain. He has to be disciplined, disruptive, and relentless for 4 quarters, not just in flashes. Jack Sawyer's rotational snaps become pivotal too. Cincinnati's offensive line is already strained, and if Sawyer can anchor his edge and squeeze the pocket consistently, the Bengals' entire offensive structure begins to collapse. That's how complementary football is built. Pressure affects throws, coverage affects reads, and together they feed into the kind of defensive rhythm Pittsburgh thrives on. And the anticipation around the practice squad decision still lingers. Asante Samuel Jr. looms as the safety valve, figuratively and literally. Even if he isn't elevated to start or rotate heavily, having him available provides stability in a game where injuries can swing momentum instantly. With Darius Slay out and depth stretched thin, this is exactly the kind of situation where a late-week elevation could prevent disaster. The Steelers know it, the fans know it, and every eye will be on the transaction wire before kickoff. Offensively, the puzzle is even more delicate. Without Isaac Sumalo, the margins tighten significantly. Spencer Anderson can handle the assignment, but the entire unit has to shift around him. The run game needs creativity, the pass protection needs structure, and the tight ends must be more than spectators. And that's where Pat Freiermuth steps into the spotlight the team has avoided giving him for far too long this season. His earlier explosion against the Bengals wasn't accidental. It was the result of smart scheming and trusting a player with a skill set built to torch the middle of the field. With Jonnu Smith struggling and the wide receivers still searching for consistent production, Pittsburgh has no excuse not to funnel the offense through its most reliable chain mover. This matchup is filled with more variables than it might appear on the surface, but that's what makes it so compelling. It's not the flash of a primetime showdown. It's not the drama of a playoff race. It's something subtler, something more revealing, a chance for the Steelers to prove they can handle expectations, capitalize on advantages, and take care of business against a battered division opponent. And the truth is, fans will know within the first 2 or 3 drives exactly which version of this team showed up. The aggressive version, the confident version, the composed version, or the hesitant, inconsistent one that has let opportunities slip away. Pittsburgh has the matchup advantage. They have the talent advantage. They have the healthier roster. They have positional depth stepping into form at the exact right time. What remains unknown is whether they have the killer instinct to finish what the injury report started. So now it's your turn, Steelers Nation. Who do you expect to rise to the moment? Which matchup do you think will define this game? And what adjustment are you most eager to see the coaching staff make on Sunday?